This is one of the sewer manholes we're constructing in Liverpool Street to divert the 100 Liverpool Street sewer around the end of what will be our Crossrail ticket hall behind us. And we're still at this location within the footprint of the former new cemetery or Bedlam burial ground. And the guys here were excavating through the cemetery layer, which we found in other parts of the site to be about 2 meters thick, with potentially, we think, across the whole burial ground, about 20,000 people were buried here between 1569 and the early 18th century. So we've got Museum of London Archaeology here working closely with the contractors to get this cleared, this shaft down, before we finish these utility works. And below this, about another 4 meters down actually, we come to the Roman level, where just in the previous works next to us we've identified a Roman road, which is seems to be a kind of main suburban Roman road coming off Bishopsgate and leading to Moorgate. Potentially just outside this excavation, crossing over the Warbrook River, most likely on a bridge because we saw the road was rising up. But of course, before we get to that point, we've got to remove the skeletons carefully from this excavation. How they lived their lives and how they died. You can tell quite a lot from study of the skeletons in terms of their gender, the age of death, and also in some cases what they died of, or in other cases certainly the afflictions and traumas they suffered during life. It'll be several months that these skeletons will be back in the Museum of London labs to get all the records made, etc. Initially we want to find out what we can about the people buried here. Well, we think about 20,000 were buried in the cemetery originally. We're only dealing really with a proportion of the cemetery in the Crossrail works, the proportion that survived development works in the 19th century from Broad Street Station, a railway station that used to stand on the north side of Liverpool Street, and then the subsequent construction of Broadgate Centre next to us here. But we think several thousand are going to be found during the main works as we dig our ticket hall, possibly 3,000, extrapolating from the numbers we've found so far in the trial pits. I think we're looking out for particular individuals. We know that there are some quite well-known individuals buried in the cemetery during that time. In the 17th century, during the period of the Civil War, when Cromwell was leading his parliamentary army against the king and subsequently setting up the Commonwealth, quite a few members of the New Model Army were actually buried in this cemetery, including a very well-known one, John Milburn, and another fellow named Robert Lockyer. Now, Robert was executed by firing squad, in fact, at St Paul's, with a team of 6 muskets. So, finding evidence for musket wounds in the skeleton should be fairly straightforward if we come across him by chance. So it's really all about taking the individual out, seeing exactly what we can find out about them, and trying to record their biography really for posterity. You can see in the pictures, can't you? It's actually quite a complicated picture at the moment. That's because we're just at the top of the cemetery, which is very disturbed, both from the later phases of grave digging. During the later decades the cemetery was open, there was probably so many burials made that each new burial disturbed the bones of the former one, so you get all this mixing up at the top of the cemetery. And then of course as well, in later centuries we've had utilities and various other building works going on in this location, so they're mixed up. So what the guys are doing now is just cleaning back to see, okay, what skeletons have we got that are articulated where the bones are still all together and they can be lifted as one. Where the bones are disarticulated, the process is really just to remove those, count the minimum number of individuals involved, and those will go straight for reburial.